Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for Motivating and Improving Team Performance. Throughout the presentation, please type your questions in the Q&A feature found on the right side of your screen. The last 10 minutes will be devoted to answering your questions. And we also invite you to use the chat feature to engage with each other, but please keep your questions for the presenter in the Q&A section. Thank you to all the Ag Labor Forum sponsors for their support and to our presenter. Dr. Tina Huff is the Chief People Officer for Duncan Family Farms, where she leads the people initiatives to support large-scale, multi-location grower operations. Her expertise includes developing people strategies and serving as a coach, mentor, and senior management strategic advisor. Tina has a PhD in psychology with an emphasis in industrial and organizational psychology and an MBA from Arizona State University. She is a member of the Society for Human Resources Management and the Society for Industrial and Organizational Psychologists. Thank you, Dr. Huff, and you may begin.
Very good, very good. Well, welcome everyone to our session. I'm real excited to talk about this topic of motivating and improving team performance and look forward to going on this journey with you. The information that we're going to cover today comes from a study that Duncan Family Farms was gracious enough to let me do with our team members at Duncan Family Farms, as well as the research that kind of went around this study that we did related to culture, fit, and how those elements are tied to company performance. And so I look forward to sharing what we learned with you and some of the basic principles around creating a culture that creates outstanding performance within an organization. Now, I don't know about you, but when I came into the forum here for the conference, I was really touched. I really enjoyed the video that popped up and started playing right away. I wasn't quite sure exactly how this virtual conference setting was going to work, and it was really cool to see the video. So I had my impression. I'd love to hear from you in the chat box. You can go to the chat. If you use just one word to describe how you felt when you saw the video, when you first came into the conference yesterday or today, put down that word. How did you feel? How did it make you feel? And I'll add in mine as well. I bet a number of us felt different things as we came in. Let's see what response. I know there's a little bit of a delay, so I'll give it just a second. Nervous. Very good. Very good. Maybe some of you weren't quite sure what to expect, just like everyone else. This is something that is a new experience for everyone. Those experiences, those feelings of coming into a new place and not knowing what to expect are feelings that employees have throughout our working lives as we're starting with new companies. And so what we're going to talk about today is the way in which cultures are established and how does, let's see if I can get my presentation to move along here. How can we, hold on. Sorry about that. Let's make sure we're moving. There we go. How can we do that? And as I mentioned, this study came from my surviving a PhD program not too long ago. I actually grew up in Hermosillo, Sonora. And so we all have experiences that we bring to work with us. And that's one of the real important experiences that I feel as well. So I worked for 30 years in human resources. That's a long time. And I've seen a lot of different companies and a lot of different ways in which owners and leaders have tried to create a culture within the environment, the company. And I want to give you some examples of things that I've seen over the years. One of my first experiences in HR was with a plastic injection molding company. I was with them for 7 years. This was my first HR experience. I was in my mid 20s. The owner was, I think, 29 years old. So very young. You can imagine the entire group of management team was pretty young. And this was in the mid 80s. So maybe before a lot of safety practices were solidified yet. He really wanted to have an environment where people work safely, which was really good. And we tracked accidents. And then every month that we did not have an accident, the company pizza party for all the employees. And we did, believe it or not, beer and pizza. I've emphasized the beer because with that particular group, that tended to be what they enjoyed the most out of those monthly gatherings at the pizza place. So that was one way in which we saw culture expressed, for better or for worse. I'm just thankful there were no accidents from the beer that we know of. Another company I worked for had a practice of having management training during the off season for the company. And this was a big deal. They would bring in speakers from the outside. Anytime any new leaders came into the company, this was what they talked about. And so the culture they tried to establish a culture through outside speakers coming in and speaking about leadership and other things relative to the business. Another company I worked for, I spent about 6 years with a Hispanic grocery store company. And in this particular company, there was an emphasis on street smart, and employees that were able to not just do the right thing on paper, but be very quick to sense what needed to be done in real life and kind of get things done, were rewarded by being promoted, even if they had mistakes that they made or that maybe would have caused somebody else to be terminated. They'd be warned, and then eventually you'd see them promoted up through the company and up through the ranks. So that emphasis of rewarding street smarts was really prevalent in that company. I also worked for a company that had a lot of clients. And so their image of culture with their employees was something that they marketed frequently. And the reason they did that is that they not necessarily wanted to have a great culture. They did, but they even more so wanted everybody else to know they had a great culture to look good with the clients that they had. So these are all methods that can kind of backfire for an organization. Maybe all of them with good intentions, but you can see how each one of them might be an action trying to create a culture, but not necessarily is creating the culture that is lasting long term. So we're going to talk about culture in our time today. We're going to talk about what it is, and then the role of the supervisor in that culture. And then we're also going to talk about characteristics of a best culture within an organization. When you think about the culture that a company wants to establish, culture at the end of the day is that daily behavior that employees engage in. And because it's daily behavior, culture is a living thing. It's never static. It starts with the values, the mission statement, the vision that a company has, and then it's carried out through the training and preparation and the kind of the management systems that are in place, and that development that's done with managers and leaders and employees. And the end result is that daily behavior, the culture that's produced in the organization. And when employees think about culture, they're really thinking about whether they can trust an organization. Or is this a place where I can have confidence in that the culture is going to support me, that this is a great culture to be in? So how do we really know what an employee is looking for? What does make up a good culture from an employee's perspective? Well, some of the research tells us that there are these three components that are rather unexpected, but are critically important to creating that culture that employees want to be in. One of them, and the first one we'll talk about, is that the leadership that the company hires is leadership that represents the values of the organization, and that managers continuously are reflecting those values. In other words, as an organization, I will only support leaders and maintain leaders that reflect our values. And if a leader is not reflecting our values, I will, as an organization, address it with them, work with them, and if they don't change their ways, we'll remove them from that position, because it's not just hurting us as a company or the manager, it's actually hurting all of the employees that report up to them by keeping that leader in place. That's the first priority. The second priority is, or item that affects an employee's sense of trust, is whether the people systems in the organization, the way things get done and the way that people get things done, are easy. Are they transparent? Is it a fair process? And those people systems really matter. If I'm asking for time off, is there a consistent way to ask for it? And do I get a consistent answer? Do I have to jump through hoops, or is it just a regular process? What about when I need to access training, or there's new equipment, we need to be prepared? Is our equipment always working properly? All of those people systems, fair, they're transparent, and that they're easy. And then the third point that research tells us is important is this aspect of collaboration within the organization. If I get my feelings hurt because somebody said something bad about me, and I then don't treat others right, then that is actually ego on my part, responding. Um, on the flip side, if someone isn't happy with something and I seek to understand why they're not happy and how can we fix it, then that shows a no ego and a willingness to work together to resolve issues on the outside. So all of these aspects are really important to the process of developing an environment where people trust, they have trust in the organization. All of this starts with the most senior leader of the company. Many times, the most senior leader, the top leader of an organization, does not realize the impact that their actions and behavior have on the rest of the company. Many times, senior leaders will think, oh, it's the supervisors or the crew leaders, and the way they interact with employees that actually sets the tone. But actually, the tone is set right up at the top. And that drives a cycle of bringing in more people that are like that senior leader, and then that's who's attracted to the organization. They get hired, and then settling in process, and then the people that are hired identify whether they really are a match or not, and the company identifies whether they really are a match or not to the values, and then that individual either self leaves or is terminated, and leaves the organization. And this cycle gradually creates an environment where people have very similar values and beliefs together. So that cycle is driven by the values that are represented by the most senior leader in the company. So if we know that, what is the supervisor's role? If we know that culture is such a critical part of trust, and that it's driven by leadership, how is it driven by leadership? And does supervisor have a role in that? And we're going to look at the supervisor's role specifically, and then also the most senior leader a little bit, as well as the coworkers. A survey or a study was done in 2018 on intention to leave an employer. So this was a nationwide study. Hundreds of thousands of people participated. And you'll see here up on the screen the things that they looked at. And they were asking, what are the top 2 things that you believe are most important for an employee to want to stay working with an employer? So here are the elements. And as we walk through these, I'm going to walk through them, you too, and go ahead and put them in the chat. We're going to compare notes here in just a second. So they asked, what about communication? Is the communication from the company the most important thing that keeps you there? Is it your opportunity to develop as an individual? Is that what keeps you there? Is it the relationship that you have with coworkers? Oh, and I skipped one, didn't I? Company outlook. Is it the outlook of the company that they're going to stay in business, that they have lots of business ahead, that they're growing, that there's lots of opportunity, that outlook, company outlook. Relationships in the workplace, pay processes. Is the pay process easy and smooth? Does it go smoothly? Are promotions and pay increases a regular part of the process? What about appreciation? Does your supervisor show appreciation for your work? Is there support there for you? And then the last item is that pay versus market. Is my pay comparable to what I could get elsewhere in the marketplace? So if you had to choose two of these for yourself, which two would you choose? Go ahead and put them in the chat. And then we're going to compare notes with the end results and see where that stands for you. Let's see here. Appreciation, very good, very good. What are the top things for you as an individual that matter to you? Just go ahead and put those in the chat there. Okay, I know that there's a little bit of delay, so I'm going to move to the next slide, and we'll see as responses come through how closely that matches up. So what we found in this study is, oh, there it is, appreciation and development, relationship with the manager and pay. Very good, very good. Appreciation, development. All right. Well, let's see if I can get back to my slideshow here. Okay, and so here are the results. Appreciation and communication. Very good. Great responses. So here we go. Oh my goodness. Such a very high mark for company outlook. This was in 2018. So the market wasn't that great. Can you imagine today, in today's market, if it was this high at that point in time, you can imagine what it would be like in today's market. So company outlook does matter to us. It is important to know that we're with a company that's stable, that has opportunity for growth, that there is opportunity for longevity. So those things are important. And then we got over and over in our comments as a group, appreciation. Far and away above all the other aspects, these 2 points are critically important to team members. And the crazy thing is that both of these things are really driven by the supervisor. If you think about the other items, they're driven by processes throughout the organization. But the supervisor is the one who's communicating that company outlook to the employee, and the supervisor is the one who's expressing that appreciation as well for the employee. So that role of the supervisor is critically important in employee retention. And if an organization is seeing turnover on a large scale, this is one of the most important things to look at as an organization. So we know from studies that if an employee feels supported by their supervisor, especially if that job is a good fit and it's a personal relationship, if the employee feels that there's a career path that is there for them, if the job quality is strong and there's an opportunity to be involved in what's going on in the organization, if an employee is feeling proud to work for the company and feel that they have autonomy and the ability to get things accomplished in the organization and be involved in that way, those things are really important to retention. However, even if all of those things are there are some elements that can keep an employee, make them start looking otherwise. And they basically have to do with exhaustion, emotional exhaustion. So even if there's high supervisor support and career opportunities and the pay is good, if the emotional exhaustion is high, an employee will start looking. I don't know about you, but I'm normally very calm and easygoing and not much ruffles me. There's always a way to figure things out or to solve it. And I kind of like having challenges like that. I'm pretty objective. But if I ever am anxious about something, it's something that's on my mind all the time. I'm trying to fix it in my mind. And if an employee has something like that that is on their mind that they're trying to fix and they don't have a way to fix it, it creates high stress, high anxiety. And that emotional exhaustion usually comes from job pressures. Maybe they're not getting the right support or the right training that they need. Um, Maybe they've been asked to do something that is not in their role to do, and so the expectation on them, they don't have the right tools to carry out what is being expected of them. Those kinds of pressures can create exhaustion that can cause an employee, your best employees, to decide to leave because they would rather not have to work with the stress, even if there is great opportunity. So you can see where the supervisor role is so critical for an organization. It is the role that brings together the support for the employee and their desire to stay engaged with the organization. The supervisor actually is the venue through which a company can reflect their values. So if the supervisor is reflecting the company's values, then the employee then has the ability to see the company's values. But if the supervisor doesn't reflect them, all the employee is going to see are those negative values they're seeing in the supervisor. And this can keep them from connecting with work groups and coworkers, and really believing that have a fit long term with that organization. There's an interesting study that expands on this. So trust in the manager is critically important. We saw trust comes from that support they receive, and we'll see a little bit more about trust here in a moment. Also, proactivity by the manager is very important. Taking initiative when there are issues to be solved, taking ownership for problems until they're resolved, being proactive to set tasks and projects up so that everyone can be successful, planning, um, being ready for the unexpected. So that proactivity partnered with the trust and then partnered with challenging goals. So expecting the most out of employees and giving them opportunities to grow and giving them larger than life opportunities for challenges that they can conquer and feel that sense of satisfaction. A combination of trust in the manager, having a manager that's proactive, and having challenging goals actually creates the highest performance. We really wanted to talk about how to motivate and create team performance. This is how performance is created. It's this combination of trust, proactivity on the manager's part to have everything ready for a great work experience, and then creating those changing goals for individuals on the team. Pretty cool. So if I have the support of my supervisor and I have a job fit, I know that I like the job that I'm in, it's a good fit for me. That lets me see the values of the organization. And then if I can see the values of the organization and those are a good fit for me, that is what leads to that magical engagement of the employee with the organization. If you think about it for yourself, when you've been most engaged, maybe it's right now with a company you're with right now, maybe it was earlier in your career, and you think about the company where you were fully engaged and where all of those things were clicking, you would have had a supervisor who supported you. You would have been in a job that was a good fit for you, and you would have appreciated the values of the organization that you were seeing. This research, as I uncovered it and then saw other research that supported it, was what led me to study this combination of fit for an employee with their supervisor and the support they receive, and how important those two are connected to each other. Now, there are some differences between sick and healthy companies. I want to explain that a little bit here. An engaged employee can feel very connected to to their supervisor, and in difficult times when things are tough, A disengaged employee might stay with the organization just so that they can get what they want from or what they need from the company. So let's take this time period right now with COVID. And there are we just did a review of salary expectations for 2021, and the data is showing that about 70% of organizations across the US have stayed very healthy and active. Their team members, their work is work that continued. They weren't necessarily affected by COVID directly. And because of that, raises continued and performance reviews continued, and their projections are pretty steady for the following year. And about 30% of companies were strongly affected by COVID. Maybe it's restaurants or in-person training or conferences, the hospitality industry, et cetera. So that's about 3% across the United States. And employees that are in those organizations that are getting a little tough and there may be opportunities for them to move somewhere else, they might stay if there's something that they're getting from the company, but still be disengaged. An engaged employee will stay because of what they can give to the organization. So they sense a purpose within that organization. If employees are in an organization, but they distrust the executives of the company, they might still stay because they trust their immediate supervisor. So that distrust of executives might not necessarily cause them to leave. They might have a good supervisor that really supports them. But look at this last little square here. Trust in the executives has twice the impact on engagement than trust in the immediate supervisor. So if there's trust in the immediate supervisor plus trust in the executive team and the executives of the organization, then that engagement is doubled. Quite impact on leader engagement. So how does that engagement happen? How is that built? So we know that companies build trust with employees when they're sharing important information. This is a critical component, and harder right now during this period of COVID when the normal ways of sharing information, in-person meetings, the party, the training sessions in person, all of that is kind of dissipated, and we're having to do things virtually like our conference right now. So we have to work a little extra hard at looking for venues to share information, but it is critical for that engagement to be sharing information. It also is very important for a company to distribute outcomes fairly. Rather than having a new role open up, maybe we're growing and we need to promote them into a manager role, and we've been kind of working with Juan over here. And so we tap him on the shoulder and say, hey, Juan, congratulations, you're now being promoted to the manager role. Well, that's wonderful for Juan. What about for Maria, who's been working really hard too in the organization and was hoping for a promotion as well? You've probably seen the commercial where the employee's expecting she's going to get promoted and doesn't, and then gets a call from the recruiter and she moves on. This distributing outcomes fairly has everything to do with engagement. Making opportunities equally available to everyone, giving people an equal opportunity to apply and to know about those opportunities really does matter within the organization. And then credibility and team management, being able to provide an environment where teams work well together and there's credibility being shared within the organization. Supervisors are charged with something a little different. In order to build trust, supervisors need to mirror the values of the organization. We saw that right at the beginning of this presentation. In fact, as a company, if we have a supervisor that's not mirroring the values of the company, we are basically saying that their values are our values if we let them stay. That's what a critical role supervisors play in representing the company. If they're doing things wrong, it's if the company is doing things wrong because they represent us. Also, the supervisor is charged with supporting the employee, and that's in work-related issues. It's also in this area of benevolence or giving people grace to make mistakes, to learn day in and day out, to get a second opportunity to try something, um, to have understanding for personal situations that come up. And these are the critical traits that allow for an employee to feel supported by their supervisor, and that is what engenders trust within the organization. How are some practical ways that supervisors can show care for their employees? We have this list that we share with our new supervisors at Duncan Family Farms, and are very important. We actually do a management must training every year, and we always include these responsibilities in that training. That's how critical they are for us. So every manager, every supervisor, every crew leader is responsible for their people, responsible to make sure that there's an open door, that employees have someone they can talk to if they have a concern or suggestion, preoccupation, an issue going on. Managing the environment. We all want an easygoing environment where we all can have fun and enjoy each other's company. It's the manager's responsibility to also make sure that that's a professional environment. And when it goes off the rails from being professional to unprofessional, it's our responsibility to bring it back, to keep it a comfortable environment for every employee or team member. Asking employees for feedback if we have change or other activities going on, getting input really makes all the difference in the world. And then asking how everything's going at least once a week. And I know great managers do this daily. They're constantly connecting with their team members and making sure that problems get solved. If you hear about a problem and it's brought to you, you're the owner, manager, supervisor, and following up until it gets completely resolved. Showing that we care and appreciating great work, all core responsibilities. I told you I'd talk a little bit about coworkers, so I want to wrap up this segment by talking about coworkers. Coworkers are also really important in trust, and especially the first 6 months of employment, we start building those relationships with our coworkers, and they're actually, according to research, coworkers are more important in our trust and engagement with a company than even a supervisor is, because coworkers create that environment for social support, and we all need social support in the workplace. They also are individually, we each carry responsibilities, and when we follow through and hold up our part of the bargain, and as far as our responsibilities go, then that creates an environment where we can trust each other to get the job done. Trust does change over time. So a new person coming on board, you're starting to establish trust by having things in common with each other, common experiences. Gradually, you start building a relationship based on seeing that individual follow through on their commitments. Long-term relationships of trust are built on shared experiences. So going through COVID together, starting a new location, getting through a software implementation project, going through training together and having shared experiences on training, just working long term and getting through hurdles at work. Those shared experiences give a shared perspective, and then you tend to give a little bit of lenience to someone when you have that bond of trust because of shared experiences. Be very careful in two ways. First, that you not let people slide on their responsibilities because you have a long relationship, especially if they're in a managerial role. They need to still reflect the values of the company, no matter how long they've worked there. And then also make sure that new people coming in are brought into the fold, and that you quickly give them an opportunity to create those relationships long term. So the last section we're going to talk about is what actually makes a best culture. We've talked about what culture is, our everyday daily behaviors with each other. We've talked about the supervisor role and how important establishing an environment of trust is. So now, what is the best culture? Is there a single best culture out there? I'd like to think that Duncan Family Farms has a great culture, but it's a great culture for me and for our team members. It may not be the best culture for other people. Each individual organization creates a culture that reflects the values of their leaders and the values of the organization. And it's going to be a little different in each organization. So, what are some of the traits of those best cultures? One is that a best culture is always positive. If you think about your culture right now and think about the things that are characteristic of your culture, and part of it is negative, then no matter how it reflects values, it's still not a positive culture to be in. And why is this important? This is not just a nice to have. A positive culture actually leads to productivity and the output of an organization. A performance and actual return on investment is driven by having a positive culture. So it is critical to the organization's performance. Um, it's important to not let an organization slide with negative culture, negative value traits, and say, that's just who we are. That's just how we are. It will actually keep you from being as successful as you can. Also, the best culture is one that fits me or that fits you. So people stay when there is a match to their values and company culture. Now, they may stay if there isn't a match, but they're going to other reasons and they're going to not be as engaged if there isn't a match to their values. They'll be complaining about stuff. They're going to undermine the leadership, going to not be as productive as they could be. They're going to constantly be thinking about why they should be somewhere else. And so it's really important to look for company values match and fix issues when you see there's a mismatch, whether it's perceived or in reality, because that really does hinder productivity. If you think about the two items that showed up as far as an intent to stay with an employer, those two items are actually perceived by the employee. They're not tangible. We're not measuring whether the company's outlook actually was good. We're measuring the perception of the employee as to whether that outlook was good. What the perception of the employee, whether they were supported or not. So it really is important to monitor the perception of employees, and that can be done a lot of different ways. One of those is through just simply chatting and talking with employees, and another is through surveys or other means. And there's a number of organizations that do a great job with surveys, and you can do them in-house as well. I want to give an example of that match to values. Match to values, those values are not necessarily negative or positive. It's just more of a preference of how an employee prefers to work. And here's a great example. If an employee prefers to receive clear direction all the time, and their supervisor gives them clear direction, then you were going to see that they're engaged. If their supervisor leaves things fairly ambiguous and leaves it up to them, it's going to stress them out and they won't be engaged. On the flip side, if you have an employee who prefers to work pretty autonomously and the supervisor gives them that autonomy, then they're going to be engaged. But if the supervisor comes across with a lot of rules and regulations and strict guidelines on how they're going to do something, they're going to feel stuck. Feel like the supervisor is real controlling, and that's going to stress them out. So you can see that values is not a negative or positive, not a right or wrong. It's more of a how do we tick? What are the things that make us successful? And it's not just the company, it's actually looking at employees. What do our employees value, and how can we make sure we're a good match to those values? So in closing, this area of trust really ties down to management practices. What are the things that you're doing as an organization? What are the things we are doing that either drive organizational trust or don't? And it really does improve the quality of life for each individual that is there. These practices are the practices we set up and then set up to be consistent day in and day out. If we have that environment of trust with our team members, what we know will happen is a team member can be engaged. And engaged employees, you can identify them because they feel as though they're appreciated, they feel secure in the environment that they're in, they feel like they have a say in what's going on, and that they're connected to the rest of the group, and that they'll be fairly treated. They'll be treated with respect, and they'll have the opportunity to understand what's going on and have transparency over the things that matter to them. Very good. You might see all kinds of values. Here's an example of values from Duncan Family Farms. And here's some great tips as a leader in the organization. As we close here, just don't, as a reminder, the top leaders' values do matter. A manager who reflects the company's values is going to help you. So be careful to only retain those managers. Your great people practices actually create appreciation for your team members. And the culture, that's an active part of company success. And trust in your senior leaders leads to engage. You're going to find your own values. Here's an example of values within Duncan Family Farms that we've identified: that no ego environment and humility in carrying things out, that all departments are equally important, having purpose in our growth, and having safety of people our first priority. You'll have your own values that you identify, and by identifying these values, then it helps you find the right match for leaders within your organization, employees within your organization. So in conclusion, culture is all about behavior, and your supervisor's behavior is what people will identify as being the company's culture, and that best culture is the one that fits you. Very good. Let's open it up for questions and anything that I can help with here at the end. And I do want to mention all of these slides will be available here in the session notes. My contact information is there as well if anyone would like to reach out. Very good.
I don't see any questions in the Q&A, so if anybody has questions, go ahead and type those in now. And we'll be leaving the session chat open even after this session ends. So if you want to do any chatting in there, you can. Thank you, Dr. Huff, and we'll see if any questions come through.
Very good. Very good. Well, thank you. Really appreciate the opportunity to share these things that we've really enjoyed working on as an organization.
No, I don't see any questions coming through.
We're good.
Yes. Okay. We ended a little early here. So thank you very much.
And here I was through.
Yes. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
You as well.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.